Spider-Man 2 is often praised as one of the greatest superhero movies ever made. But what if some of the original ideas had made it to the big screen? Today, we're breaking down the unused concept art from Spider-Man 2. From alternate takes on Doctor Octopus to bold visual directions that never made it past the sketch phase, these artworks reveal a very different vision of Sam Raimi's classic. Let's dive in. Before moving on to Doctor Octopus, it's worth noting that another villain was also considered for the film, Lizard. He eventually appeared, but only in his human form as Peter's professor at the university. And although not a villain, another important secondary character that was considered was Black Cat, possibly to add more depth to Peter and MJ's romantic drama. The conceptual art for Doc Ock actually began to be created during the first Spider-Man, when the classic villain was first considered as a potential foe. Jim Atchison brought in this drawing of Doctor Octopus by Paul Catling, one of his conceptual artists. We looked at it and our reaction was, wow, he got it. It had majesty, it had violence, it showed the insertion of the device. There was the feeling that the tentacles controlled him, yet there was still some humanity there. The image melded man and machine in an amazing way. The Goblin had been picked for the first film, Laura Ziskin noted, because his emotional resonance as father of Peter's friend Harry Osborn provided plenty of possibilities for character development and dramatic conflicts. But Dr. Otto Octavius, while one of the most visually compelling villains, was something of a mystery, a character introduced in the comics as an inscrutable atomic genius obsessed with his experiments and held in awe by his colleagues, seemingly a loner without wife or family or significant other. A very early insertion device concept by Alex Tavelaris. The art department went a different direction, focusing on an elaborate mechanical apparatus instead. The Catling artwork was an important influence over at ImageWorks, as was the script itself. The writing of the script had a lot to do with how we started to conceive of the arms in terms of their physical design, their movements, and how they related to the character of Doc Ock, John Dykstra said. In one version of our story, the tentacles were Ock's creation, the end in themselves. In the final version, the tentacles are the devices that allow Ock to work in an environment where you couldn't physically put your hands, and they become fused to his body in a fusion energy accident. The tentacles start out as benevolent supporters of his efforts and take on their own personality. The insertion device, by which Doc Ock's mechanical arms would be attached, was itself a long conceptual journey. There was a ton of art for Doc Ock's insertion device that represents Sam and Neil trying to find their way, Tom Wilkins recalled. Illustrator James Carson recalled, the device is gleaming and powerful. Avi Arad also liked the idea that Doc Ock could get on the device, and that it was reminiscent of an exercise machine. The tentacles themselves went through a long journey of conceptual art. These early concepts by Tim Flattery explored the idea of giving each tentacle a recognizable personality and show the tentacles as being able to open up in sections. For the art department, some of the inspirations for Doc Ock were photographs of robots, mechanical equipment, wires, tubes, anything that applied helped inspire the direction. Paul Catling recalled, there were a lot of tentacle drawings. We first tried to get an overall feel and experimented with jointed arms and spined tentacles in various materials, white and clear plastics, black polished steel with various nodules and spiky protuberances to give the tentacles a solid, muscled, and dangerous look. The design challenge was difficult because they needed to look tough enough to pick up heavy objects but light enough to retract. To add further menace, Jim Atchison suggested the tentacles should have little centipede grabbers that could spring out and bite into concrete to help Ock climb up walls. Those ideas were ultimately abandoned. The tentacle ends received a lot of attention because the grabbers had to pick up the smallest pin, but also punch through the thickest wall. Early on we experimented with a kind of flower bud shape that had 3 petals that could open in 3 or 4 stages. This design stuck. Scott Stockdick, visual effects supervisor, recalls, I remember reading Spider-Man comics under my school books back in 4th grade. I revisited those comics at the start of both the last Spider-Man movie and this show. It was pretty clear in the comic books that Doc Ock is very capable and agile with those arms. We knew our CG version had to be able to do anything and be graceful doing it. It was daunting, John Dykstra agreed, but one of the great things about this business is that if it isn't daunting, you can figure the effect will be obsolete before the film is released. One of the difficult things for Doc Ock was there was no paradigm for him. For example, we had a paradigm for the Green Goblin on his glider. We used the business of kick turns and extreme body language we've all seen from kids riding skateboards and snowboards or someone kicking off the lip of a big wave on a surfboard. But an octopus is too organic, and doesn't have the right strength to be the ultimate paradigm for this character, and Doc Ock isn't like any two-legged creature. The look and very nature of Otto's fusion device was one of James Carson's major assignments. The starting point was, it needed to be big and wonderful and visual, and something that had to do with the next level of technology with potential for changing the life of all humankind, recalled Carson, who started his initial design phase with upward of 30 quick sketches. Actual fusion work takes place in a closed environment, James Carson noted, so in this option I imagined him being encased in a translucent sphere which might contain the reaction. In the big screen version of Doc Ock, the scientist is no longer an atomic energy researcher. By 2004 energy production was a huge issue, so Dr. Octavius is now developing a potentially unlimited source of clean fusion energy. His experiments conducted under the aegis of OS Corp, the company where Harry Osborn heads special projects after the death of his father. In fact, the future of the company is riding on Dr. Octavius's theories. In the complex experiment, Octavius manipulates the fusion reaction with elaborate mechanical arms that form a metal spine along his spinal column. The smart arms themselves are wired to the scientist's brain and controlled via a neural link. In his classic comics origin story, Dr. Otto Octavius's 4 mechanical arms are appendages extending from a metal contraption that, in the occasionally inexplicable logic of comics, becomes attached to his body in some strange way, as one of the doctors attending to the injured Dr. Octavius notes, after a radiation accident. John Dykstra, Visually X designer, recalls, "The toughest thing about the CG tentacles was the animation. It was hard to give them the fluidity and strength the script called for, and still make them mechanical." This seemingly fanciful Alex Tavolaris image of Ock handling a hot dog is actually designed to illustrate the precision and dexterity of his powerful arms. Scott Stockdick, Visually X supervisor, recalls, "Everything we do in EX is rooted in the physics of the real world, like the weight of Ock's tentacles and how fast he could move up and down a building. In 2D there are so many ways you can cheat that, whether you're talking about the comic books or concept art. Once you get the live-action photography, plate and the CG elements and have to go into the real world, you can cheat things while still being rooted in reality." For the upper arms, a more subtle and minimalist design was at one point considered, with rounded edges at the ends. This design was intended to resemble the ultimate version of the character from the comics. And that wraps up our look at the unused concept art from Spider-Man 2. It's always fascinating to see the alternate paths the movie could have taken. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe for more, and share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear which design you would have liked to see on the big screen.